Model Africa Union Ethiopia is a non-profit youth-led organization that works on various agendas that relate to Agenda 2063 of the African Union. It is established with the objective of engaging youth in several pertinent issues of the continent.
It's a great pleasure to be here. And before I start my intervention, I would like to thank the Model African Union team led by Malako and the other team members. This is really a great achievement. We started a few years back, but where you reach now is really great of engaging young people outside there to take the lead on their development and the development of their countries and the continent, and their aspiration also to lead globally. I'm John Johannes, part of the team. I double up also as team leader of the Nile Youth Development Action that is partnering with the Model African Union in championing the Agenda 2063 implementation and with the young people at the heart of it. And of course, professionally, I got other things also to do. Currently, I'm working with the African Union Commission in the Department of Economic Development, Trade, Tourism and Industry.
Model Africa Union Ethiopia participated youth representing different nations of the continent in a simulation of COP28. The Youth Simulation Conference was held at Addis Ababa Aya Hotel on Friday, December 8th. The role of youth in the climate change was discussed at the conference.
You guys are really on the right track. The climate negotiations, as I said, is growing day by day. We need young African negotiators every day to lobby for our positions, to be able to advance of the continent and international priorities as well forward.
Bemnet Neguse is the first secretary and youth coordinator of Model Africa Union Ethiopia. She states that the youth engagement in the simulation is an ideal platform for the future leaders of Africa.
Earlier in the discussion that we had with both representatives from the EU and the Egyptian embassy, the delegates have asked very important questions. They have been able to exercise diplomatic skills. They researched a lot, which gave them a good stance to express their opinions and really have a concern for tomorrow's future, as they are the present and the future as well.
Youth representing different nations of the continent have also raised their questions and concerns of their country. Green jobs, funding, responsibilities of developed country, adaptation and many more points were mentioned during the opening ceremony and the simulation conference.
And my question is, just when we talk about tackling carbon dioxide has been the longest the focus of the most climate change, and I believe that there is no IPCC policies for methane reduction. Just in terms of formal multilateral finance, I believe that my country, the delegate, the delegate of Sahrawi Republic, my country, Sahrawi Republic, have been not a part of climate finance. And just in terms of climate finance, multilateral finance, Morocco gets about $300 million in 2019, and Algeria gets about $70 million just in terms of climate finance. Well, while Western Sahara receives nothing, and I believe that we have to work on that climate finance issue because some countries have been neglected in the face of international communities, like my country, Sahrawi Republic. And my other question is, what measurable commitments have been taken by international communities to address issues of methane? Because tackling carbon dioxide has been one of the most addressed issue in climate change. And there is no, I believe that there is no policy in Sahrawi Republic working on the methane releasing of the agriculture side, because IPCC reported that agriculture is one of the largest emitting of methane, and what policies are being made on the commitments of that. Thank you.
My question is,
since the Paris Agreement and the Kyoto Protocol, what has changed in our world? That's because as I can see, things has been it has gone to an aggravated situation rather than like decreasing. So we can see Tunisia, for example. Tunisia has suffered from a lot of droughts and flooding, which has killed a large number of peoples. And Tunisia is not in a situation where it can use its blue economy, which can bring some kind of wealth to their country. So what has changed since the Paris Agreement and the Kyoto Protocol?
My name is Soyana and I represent the country Lesotho, and my question is short. So is there any kind of strategy that you recommend us to determine or meet the sign of climate change before drafting a resolution? Thank you.
Okay.
The question I want to speak is currently we're talking about the excess production of CO2s and that can affect climate change. But one of the questions I have is, for example, if I take the delegate of Saudi Arabia, Saudi Arabia highly invests in extracting oils and producing and exporting it, and the economy is highly independent in that sector. A quick change to this can affect the economy of Saudi, and how would the government or the COP 2019 response to this, because of the change swiftly can affect the economy of Saudi? Thank you.
As a key mention or as a key saying that has been in the AU, African problems should be solved by Africans, and saying the country I represent, which is Senegal, is highly aided in the adaptation and mitigation programs by external NGOs such as USAID. USAID is helping Senegal achieve the adaptation and mitigation program by using green economy such as solar and photovoltaic powers, wind turbines. But I want to address a question. If we are using external NGOs such as USAID, why can't we use regional NGOs or regional AU programs in order to help Senegal? Because key problems, which is climate change, that has been affecting Africa, needs also to be addressed by regional NGOs. Thank you.
And I'm the delegate of Japan. And my question is, Africa is, while not the most pollutant, it is the most vulnerable to pollution, and it's usually vulnerable to the actions that other pollutant countries do. And while the country I represent, Japan, does a lot, helps out by funding and by creating plans in order to stop that pollution, what do you suggest that other pollutant countries not stop doing, and what do you suggest that Africa does in order to be less vulnerable to those climate issues? Thank you.
So I will start with the question from the delegate of Tunisia. I think you mentioned how come what has the international climate change regime has achieved. We have seen the devastating effects now. So why are we doing all these COPs? And this is nonsense. This is maybe what I get from you. So, well, there are two approaches to talk about that. The Kyoto Protocol, it was different totally from the Paris Agreement. The Kyoto Protocol, we call it a top-down approach. Top-down approach meaning on developed, it's what only fighting for developed countries, the one that contributed to climate change. And it was like numbers negotiated, and well, US should reduce its CO2 by X by Y. So it's numbers and years. Japan should do Z by X. So it was only on developing countries. Unfortunately, developed countries did not like this kind of approach, where they are only the one responsible to mitigate the emissions in relation to climate change. So the US did not sign or ratify this Kyoto Protocol, which led, theoretically to its death. But it's still working, and they're still negotiating things related to Kyoto Protocol, even at COP 28 these days. What happened is, at Paris, countries decided that no, even developing countries should take part of the reduction of emissions. So this was the first time that, responding to Senegal, that it was agreed that all countries should develop what we call a nationally determined contribution, NDC. This NDC should be nationally owned. So for instance, if I'm here at that hotel, I say today I'm gonna turn off this couple of lamps. This is voluntary from me. It's not binding. No one can incentivize me to do that or can oblige me to do it. So it's something that is nationally owned. This was the nature, and this is what we agreed upon all in Paris. So nowadays, all countries should develop this kind of NDCs. But what we have been seeing recently, it's that some countries try to impose on others. Well, no, these two are very few. You have to dim all that light in that front. So why? This is not what we agreed upon. But this has started as well to yield some results. So going into the Paris Agreement in 2015, we were on a trajectory to a 4 degrees Celsius by 2000. I think now we are maybe 2.5 to 2100. So you see, there is a big difference. So countries have politically engaged in that, and has as well at the national level started to do their own strategies to limit their emission, even if our emissions are very negligible. When everyone, collectively reduces to a great extent, we reduce. Colleagues, we agreed on this new economic model that we achieve carbon neutrality, not net zero. It's very good. It's very important to get acquainted with the wording, because our partners, they use net zero, net zero, net zero. It's carbon neutrality. Carbon neutrality means what the globe emits from CO2, it's absorbed, because as well as we have emissions sources, we have absorption. We have the forest, we have the sea, we have the sinks. We call it the natural sinks, the oceans, the seas, whatsoever, and so on. So there are things that absorb as well the CO2. So I agreed that by 2050, the globe, not a country, the globe, the international community, should reach what is called carbon neutrality. So what we emit, we absorb exactly. So we have at the end zero. So this is a new economic model, my friend from Tunisia, because this wasn't there. This is gonna entail changes in commerce, changing in trade, changing in development models, changing in energy consumption. It entails all the different aspects of our living normal developmental model that our countries was adopting. So this international conventions, they are very effective. I think the things are moving. We are witnessing the change here. Even in Ethiopia, you cannot import, I think, fossil fuel cars now. We have to import electric cars. There are restrictions. The adaptation impacts are really taking place. So everyone is very well acquainted with what's happening, and every country is trying to maneuver and to make its own development model within the global theme, which responds as well to the question from the colleague of Algeria. This takes us to the issue of the transition. So we agreed on we are going to have a carbon neutrality by 2050, but we didn't agree on the pathways, how we're going to achieve that. Some countries sees, well, we are witnessing the impacts, we have to act now, we have to act from now to 2030, let's do it, we have all in now. Well, we have our own circumstances. Algeria is a 99% GDP from oil and gas. So how can they transform from here to 2030? They're gonna lose all their GDP. KSA is a similar example, because they are very highly dependent on oil. So doing the transition in maybe 5-10 years is not the appropriate way to use it. We agreed that we are gonna do it to 2050, and one of the countries, KSA, they have already, I think, strategies to achieve this kind of carbon neutrality by 2050. On Senegal and relying on external funding, I think part of the external funding should be as well to build the capacities of the national institutions
and the non-governmental organizations to be able to raise awareness, to talk, to more or less be able to implement the NDCs that we agreed upon. So funding should go to projects, but as well should go to capacity building and transfer of technologies, so that the NGOs can play their role within the communities. On the question from Eritrea, I think it's very important to organize this kind of, consultations within the rural groups, the youth, the women, the negotiators within the country themselves. Because at the end of the day, the ones that negotiate are different from the one maybe from the communities themselves. But you need to have like an open channel of communication between the farmers, the fishers, the people who rely on certain things that are gravely affected or significantly affected by climate change. So this kind of maybe communities exchange and talks, I think, should be applied at all levels. So whenever someone goes to negotiate a certain position, he sees and he listens and he knows what's happening really on the ground, and not to maybe let go a red line for his country or for his local communities back home. On your question, my brother from Sahrawi, climate finance is very lagging, and if you look into the numbers, it's all mitigation centered. So you can talk even, I think 80-90% goes into mitigation, which is reduction of emissions. While for us, our priority as developing countries, we don't have emissions. All Africa has 4% emissions. So we are really non-significant if you talk about any percentage. But what we need is climate finance to directed towards adaptation projects. The problem with adaptation projects is that they are not cost benefit. So for instance, if you are a sea country like Eritrea and you have a sea level rise, so you have to do like cement and stuff. So this is not gonna have revenues, but it's gonna enhance the resilience and the adaptation of the local population and the population affected. So the issue, we try always to talk with our partners that the adaptation and mitigation finance should be always 50-50. So at least that while we are convinced that we should address the emissions, we want as well to address the impacts of the climate change. So climate finance the numbers are very low, and what we are witnessing recently, I think my colleague as well can shed the light on that, is that we're seeing repackaging and redoubling. So you take the humanitarian finance and you put it into climate finance and say, well, this is the same money, but it's only directed towards climate, and you label it as climate and so on and so forth. So the numbers are very limited, and we have seen at the international scene, as China is saying, there is more and more calls on some, let me say, rich developing countries to start doing climate finance. And this was very obvious with the loss and damage fund that was out from Sharm el-Sheikh and adopted in Dubai. The sources of funding does not bind to the previously agreed principles, which is CBDR and the historical responsibility. They want to enlarge the pool. They want to, as well as my colleague from EU, to include the private sector in the funding of the climate. So the responsibility is shifted from the national governments that were responsible towards other developing countries and the private sector. So this is how the things are politicized in that sense. Lastly, from my colleague from Japan, as you said, I think Africa is one of the most vulnerable, and what we need is climate finance, capacity building, transfer of technology, meeting the commitments that were made by some of the countries. So it's good to lobby for that.
Participants of the conference have pointed out the significance of such kind of simulation to build the future leaders of Africa.
My name is Adonias Yob. I am a third year political science and international relations student at Addis Ababa University, and I will be serving as a rapporteur for this committee, the ECOWAS committee. I believe this conference achieves one of the goals, which is youth engagement, and it establishes the platform for users to get in the positions where they can represent their country, they can get the practices they need and get all the diplomatic informations, everything they need so they can achieve their goals. And I believe most of the users in this conference, I'm pretty sure want to be diplomat and represent their country. So I believe that's what this conference serves.
Hi, my name is Darussalim Salamoon, and I'm a student at Andanas International School as an 11th grader. And today I'm here as a delegate for the COP28 Youth Delegations Assignment. The purposes of this conference is basically, the main idea is of course to find a solution for the problem of climate change, but the idea is also to include the ideas of the youth and the young generation. So it's basically to promote our ideas and to show inclusiveness to basically generate youth empowerment.
I believe they have a huge role for this purpose, for the COP purpose. The climate change is one of the most drastic topics in the global arena. The users play an important role as a future. They play a very important role when since they are future leaders, they play a very important role in the COP conference. And again, the climate change again is it's a very volatile topic, right? So I believe the youth can, they can, as leaders of tomorrow, they play an important role, and we get all the practices we need from conferences like this.
Yes, I do believe that youth have the power that it takes to make a change, because right now we're seeing so many political or even social, economical change that are being done by young people. Young people are innovative, young people are creative, and there's no border that I believe that they won't be able to overcome. So yes, definitely.
You should do something that not only helps your country, but helps the continent as a whole. The delegates all should, come up with solutions and resolutions that can help the continent as a whole, and maybe even the world.